Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining today and for Visit Cornwall for inviting Visit Britain to present. My name is Devki Patel and I work in the research team at Visit Britain, and so our scope is looking after the international stats and sentiment. So today I'll take you through the latest international overview. So we'll look at what flight bookings are looking like to the UK, we'll look at visit and spend forecasts, as well as some sentiment from our consumer tracker. So first up, if we look at inbound prospects for the next few months, we can see on the next slide, these are flight bookings. So this is showing bookings made each week at the bottom of the chart compared to the same week in 2019. So we're comparing to a normal year here, and these are bookings made from overseas residents to the UK. The data starts from July 2021 up to present day. So you can see about 3/4 of the way through the impact of the Omicron variant at the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, with bookings dropping to a peak low of around -82%. But then we can see more recently this year, we have seen an increase in bookings and some of the highest booking rates that we have seen since the pandemic began. So throughout February, we saw bookings at around -30%. We saw a slight dip during the first week of March. This was mainly driven by Eastern Europe due to the conflict, but we have seen bookings recover back to -30% in the second week of March. I ran some data this morning, and the third week of March is also looking at -30%. So yeah, we're seeing a significant recovery in bookings. If we go on to the next slide, so this is the same data, so inbound flight bookings to the UK, but we have it this time broken down by region. First off, we can see that there consistently been strong bookings from North America. So this is the fourth market along. We can see in the first week of March, bookings were down only -16%. So this is made up mostly of the US. So this market is really leading the way for recovery. The column in red is Northeast Asia, which we know has not been recovering that well. There have been more local lockdowns in China recently, and we are likely to see these figures picking up anytime soon. For the rest of Asia, so South Asia and Southeastern Asia, we can see these regions recovering at a slightly better pace compared to Northeast Asia. For the Middle East, so in the third column, we've seen some really strong figures this year, as we have with Oceania since the borders opened up. We're seeing bookings increase as the weeks go by for these two regions. And then if we focus on Europe, as I mentioned, we've seen some weaker figures from Eastern Europe in the last month, but the strongest prospects from Europe are seen from Northern Europe, with arrivals at -20% in early March, while Southern and Western Europe bookings are around -30%. So yeah, quite a lot of a variation by market, but as travel restrictions loosen and borders open up, we are seeing travellers return. So if we go on to the next slide, so what I was showing you before were bookings, but on this chart here we have arrivals. So this is arrivals to the UK by air in the weeks along the bottom compared to the same week in 2019. And usually we see quite a lag between the bookings and arrivals, so these figures here will be lower than what we saw on the previous slide. So in the last week, you can see that arrivals reached -47%, so half the amount seen in 2019. And we're seeing these figures have gradually increased since the end of January. So we're seeing here that recovery is moving in the right direction. And if we look further ahead, so we look at the flight bookings picture for Q2 of this year, so April to June. And again, no, we can go on to the next slide, please, Humphrey, thank you. So the figures here are showing, again, the comparison for April to June 2022 compared to 2019. And here we can see it broken down by region. So at the total level, for April to June, we're seeing arrivals down 44%. Short-term prospects are looking strongest from Northern Europe and North America, which you can see in the darker green on the table. Southern Europe, Western Europe and South America are also doing well, and are tracking just better half the normal level seen in 2019. Oceania at -63%, although as I mentioned, we're seeing stronger bookings since the borders opened. And as before, Northeast Asia is still way behind other markets. But if we do see bookings continue at the rate they are, it's likely that these figures will improve even further in the future. And one trend that we have seen is that outbound bookings from the UK have been recovering at a faster pace than inbound. So for outbound in January, we saw arrivals down -59%, but for inbound, it's -73%. And we did see this trend last year, and we're seeing it continue so far in 2022. If we move on to the forecasts, so Visit Britain produce forecasts a few times a year, and our most recent one was updated in February this year. So for 2022, we're expecting 21.2 million visits, so around half of what received in 2019, and 16.9 billion spend. So that was 59% on 2019 levels. So this forecast takes into account the impact of the variant. So it's a slight downgrade on the forecast that was made last year, but it was also run before the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well. But as I said before, flight bookings are suggesting that we're not seeing too much of an impact outside Eastern Europe as of yet. So if we look at the pattern of recovery this year, we know that visitor numbers fell sharply in January, but started recovering in February. We're forecasting a gradual pickup through the rest of the year, but this is contingent on no return of travel restrictions, as well as a return of traveller confidence. And then by the end of 2022, we're forecasting visits to have recovered to around 2/3 of pre-COVID levels. However, if flight bookings continue to pick up at the current pace, then the final figures could be even higher. And it may take a few years for visitor numbers to return to 2019 levels. For those markets where restrictions are in place and traveller confidence has not yet returned, it's going to take a bit longer for figures to return for where they were. And for this year, in terms of the makeup of a visit, we're expecting spend per visit to remain higher than pre-pandemic levels due to the average length of stay, and also because of inflation and rising costs as well. Now, Visit Britain only do forecasts for the year ahead, but our partners at Tourism Economics do longer term forecasts, which you can see here from 2023. So we're predicting spend levels to return to normal by 2025 in nominal terms, and in real terms, we expect spend to recover by 2026. So still a few years to go, and you can see the dip in the middle of this chart is the loss from 2020 2021. And in terms of figures, that loss is actually equated to £50.4 billion in inbound tourism spend. So a huge loss for the sector. But hopefully, as I said, by 2026, we'll see those figures return. On this slide, I just wanted to focus on the pre-COVID picture and focus on the Southwest and Cornwall. So in the top table, we can see the Southwest of England was seeing a rise in visits consistently pre-pandemic. By 2019, we were attracting over 2.5 million visits annually. So this was 6% of total inbound visits. The spend for this region, visitors were spending 1.3 billion, and that was around 5% of total inbound spend. So in terms of the Southwest, holidays were the most popular reason to visit, followed by visiting friends and relatives, and the majority of visits were taken during the summer period. And in terms of inbound markets, the region that was most visited by travellers, Germany was the most visited, the Southwest was most visited by visitors from Germany. So this was around 900,000 visits a year, followed by the US, France, Irish Republic and the Netherlands. So yeah, quite an attractive region for a wide range of travellers. And then for Cornwall specifically in the bottom table, there were 353,000 visits in 2019. This was just short of the record in 2018 and accounted for 14% of all visits to the Southwest. And these visitors were spending around 168 million, and that was 13% of total spend for the region. So pre-pandemic, both the Southwest and Cornwall were growing regions for inbound travel. And whilst we don't do region-specific forecasts, we can look at what the wider regions and nations are looking like this year. And the figures here are showing visits and spend as a proportion of 2019. So the visits table to the left, we can see that the rest of England is likely to recover at a faster pace than London. And by Q4 of this year, we expect visits to reach just under 70% of levels seen in 2019. And then for spend on the right-hand side, a similar pattern, visits, but with the rest of England showing even quicker recovery, with spend levels reaching 78% of 2019 levels for Q4. So on average, we can see the rest of England recovering at a faster pace than the average UK figures, especially compared to London. So that was some of the hard stats, but now if we move on to consumer sentiment, we've recently commissioned our 4th wave of our international COVID-19 sentiment research, and we've been running this since December 2020. So some of you may be familiar with this, but just as an overview, we've commissioned this in partnership with Visit Scotland, Visit Wales and London and Partners in conjunction with TCI Research. And the aim is really to understand changing consumer sentiment towards leisure travel in general, but also to Britain and its nations and regions. And the most recent wave went to field at the end of February. So we're still waiting for a final report on this, but I just wanted to share a few top lines with you today. So overall, we have travel sentiment here. We saw that sentiment reached its highest levels since our research began. So 83% wanted to take an international leisure trip in the next 12 months, which you can see in navy on the top chart, and 54% said that they would take an international trip. So this was up from the previous wave. In terms of where travellers were in their booking stage, only 43% had decided where to go or book their trip so far. So there's still quite a big proportion who could be influenced by their destination choice this year. We go on to the next slide. So looking at where international travellers want to go, Europe is still very much top of mind. So 59% would consider Europe in the next 12 months, and 13% would consider Britain. So we've seen Britain's competitive position with Europe improve since the last wave, which was run back in August. It now has a market share of 23%, which you can see in the last column of the chart in dark blue. You can see that Britain's share is highest among long-haul markets in green. However, I did say earlier that was quite a lot of variation by long-haul markets. So places like North America and the Middle East showing the strongest prospects, while Asian countries are lagging behind. But overall, we have seen that Britain's consideration for travel this year has recovered since last August, and Britain is definitely on the bucket list for 2022. If we now look at where the travellers want to go in the UK, so the results that are coming through are showing that over half of leisure intenders would consider England. And again, that's highest among long-haul markets at 62%. Scotland's also popular, with over a third wanting to visit that nation, while just under 1 in 5 want to visit Wales. We also asked this question one level down, so we asked which region they would want to go to in England. London was top at 41%, and we are seeing a higher interest in cities compared to the previous wave of research as traveller confidence returns. But the Southwest is also doing quite well, with 1 in 5 of England trip intenders wanting to saying that they would consider the region. And this was particularly true for those from Australia, Canada, Germany, India and Italy. And next, looking at where the travellers want to go. So cities, as I mentioned, are of high interest amongst England intenders, but other areas are also doing well. So 1/3 would want to visit coastlines, and just under a third want to visit countryside villages and mid-sized towns. So Cornwall here really ticking all those boxes. And what we have seen here also is that 43% of England intenders also want to roam around. So they want to visit different types of places. So a region that can offer a variety of different activities, attractions and environments is an important factor for many travellers during the next year. And this concept of a variety of things to do was confirmed in the activities data we received this wave. So this chart here is showing those who are very interested in the activities listed. And what we saw this time was that a high proportion were interested in all the activities listed. So this is reflecting a desire to return to a normal pattern of holiday behaviours for many travellers. In particular, activities that require more social interactions and activities at crowded places saw the biggest uplift in this wave. So this is showing that many travellers want that full holiday experience and also feel more confident doing these activities as we come out of the pandemic. And some of the attitudinal statements in this survey also confirmed this behaviour. So fewer are now saying that they will look for less crowded places, even if it means missing out on must-see attractions. So this has gone from 71% to 66%, and a higher proportion saying that they would feel comfortable with public transport. So this has gone up to 68% from 61% last August. So yeah, we're seeing some shifts in returning to pre-pandemic behaviour. However, concerns related to health and safety of COVID are still in the minds of consumers. So here we have travel concerns. So how concerned are travellers about the following factors when considering their next international trip? So the previous wave of results is in blue and the current results are in red. We've seen a slight easing of COVID health related travel concerns since last year. But we are still seeing a few concerns, so things like worrying about other people not following COVID rules, down from 78 to 72%. But we also see here that cost-related concerns have held up from last year. So this includes things like affordability of airfares and affordability of robust travel insurance. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves with the current rising costs. And finally, what would make people more likely to travel to Britain in particular? Well, at the top of this chart, we can see that money back guarantee should I wish to cancel my trip is top, and this was also top in the previous wave. So reassurance is still really key for a lot of consumers. So making sure that their money is safe should things change is top of mind, because they want to make sure that their money is safe and their trip can be refunded if things change. Things like good deals are becoming more important. So an attractive offer on flights or accommodation is now the number 2 activator, and this has increased since the last wave. So these sorts of aspects like the prices and practicalities are becoming a little bit more relatively important to international travellers. And lastly, we saw an easing in some of these COVID-related factors since the previous wave. So things like vaccine passports, removal of quarantine, and decrease in COVID cases, which went from 27% to 23%. So yeah, we're seeing some of the money-related factors becoming slightly more important for travellers. So that was just a quick snapshot of some of our sentiment research. We are hosting a webinar of the full results on the 6th of April, and we'll also be publishing a report on vb.org in early April as well. But if we have some time, I just wanted to mention some other research which we have in the pipeline and will be useful to most of you. So firstly, we have a project called MIDAS coming up. So this stands for Motivations, Influences, Decisions and Sustainability. And this will be an update and refresh of some of the research we carried out in 2016. So a real deep dive into traveller behaviours and attitudes, booking habits, and also some detailed analysis on sustainability. And this will be one of the biggest pieces of research we've done, as it spans 27 international markets. So that's currently in field, and we're expecting results at the end of April. We also have our new Brexit research. So this aims to establish the ownership of national identity cards and passports in key EU markets. And what we want to really find out is what is the understanding of travel rules in the post-Brexit era. And then we have an important topical piece of research about the impact of travel due to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. So this is carried out across key European markets in North America. And we want to basically find out whether these markets still see travelling to Europe and Britain as safe in the current climate. Yeah, we'll be sharing results on our channels as soon as we can. So yeah, that's me today. Happy to answer a few questions, but yeah, if you do have any questions about any of the data that was presented, please do email us. Our email address is research@visitbritain.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very compelling and quite encouraging for us down here in the far southwest. A question, but more of a statement for some of the people on the line is, we have seen a real growing interest. It did come up last week, other than the thing about the price of pasta, was the Italian market and the travel trade seemed to have discovered Cornwall quite a bit. It sort of snuck up on us, really. But you have good, I would just want to say to everybody that you've got a good insight section in the VB library, and there's lots of good material up there people looking into the source markets and what the characteristics of those markets are. Because we tend to think of just Germans and Dutch here and the odd American and diaspora, but certainly the Italian is on the rise.
Yeah, we do have on our website, we have market theme pages. So yeah, do take a look at that if you want market specific insights.
Okay, any questions from those on the line? I think we're absorbing all the information.
There were a couple of advanced questions that came through.
Yep.
One of them was, what markets will come back first?
Yeah, from the forward keys data that I was showing earlier, so North America is one of our strongest markets at the moment, and bookings from Middle East and Northern Europe are doing really well. I mean, the rest of Europe, barring Eastern Europe at the moment, are also showing good bookings for late spring and summer as well. So yeah, short haul markets more than long haul markets, which are still lagging behind.
One other one was, what sort of activities do people want to do?
At the moment, yeah, the latest wave of data are basically showing that international travellers are more willing to do a wide range of activities than before. Obviously, for Britain intenders, you know, history and heritage, iconic attractions, cultural attractions are of most interest. But we're actually seeing that for Britain intenders, compared to those who want to go to Europe, there's more interest in things like outdoor nature activities and sports, as well as cultural events, and experiencing more interactive experiences like culinary activities, dining out and socializing with locals. So I guess a few of these activities are speaking to the things that people have missed out from over the pandemic. So really wanting to have that sort of full experience and immerse oneself in the holiday is quite important for a lot of international travellers at the moment.
Thank you. And one other is, what is the impact of Russia-Ukraine conflict on international travel to Britain?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we are currently, we've finally got some research on this in field, but some of the top lines that are coming through are basically saying that, yeah, the majority do see Britain as a safe and secure holiday international destination. I guess the impact is being mostly felt in Eastern Europe, but those that said that, yeah, their willingness to travel was being affected, I basically said they'll be adopting a wait and see approach about decision making for holidays. And we've not really seen this being translated into the bookings data, as I showed earlier, but it's definitely something that we'll be monitoring in the next few weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? As I said, I would highly recommend spending time on the portal with Visit Britain and the insights on England as well.